So she's here tonight to answer any detailed questions that members might have on the actual report itself, on the playing pitch strategy. So since 2016, when the original PPS was prepared and published, the Council has also prepared and published 2 progress reports which relate to the delivery of the actions included in the original playing pitch strategy. And they were published in 2017 and 2019. So that has been an update, if you like, of the actions that were included in the original action plan in the playing pitch strategy specifically for pitches and for the different sports. Now, obviously, the pandemic has significantly impacted on grassroots sport, with significant periods of time when participation in sports has either stopped or been greatly reduced. And both Sport England and the national governing bodies for sport have been involved in the preparation of the PPS refresh. And at the start of the process, they agreed that due to the fact that the Council has published the 2 progress reports based on the original PPS, the impact of COVID, and then a refresh of the playing pitch strategy was sufficient, rather than doing a whole update to the PPS. And Sport England and the national governing bodies for sport have also signed off the final playing pitch strategy that's presented to members tonight. So in terms of the scope of the playing pitch strategy refresh, the sports that it covers are football, rugby union, rugby league, cricket and hockey. Although for rugby league, there's no clubs or pitches in the district, and for hockey, there are no clubs in the district that play. And also the scope of the refresh covers artificial turf pitches, which provide a multi-purpose surface for sport. And also this PPS refresh covers the whole of of Craven district. Now, the original PPS just looked at the plan area, so it excluded the part of the district that was in the national park. But this refresh covers the whole of Craven district, including that part of the national park that falls within the district. And that approach was considered to be important to adopt as residents travel through the district to access sport. So it's an assessment of the supply and demand within the whole of Craven district. And that approach was agreed with the Orchdales National Park Authority. So the aim of the PPS refresh is, 1, to review progress on actions and recommendations set out in the original 2016 PPS. 2, to revisit the supply of and demand for pitches to identify any new key issues and changes. And the result of that is that the playing pitch strategy includes updated action plans for each sport. And there's been a consultation with sports clubs, town and parish councils, the education sector, Sport England and the national governing bodies for sport, as well as it's being prepared. So for just to give you a summary really of the key findings, paragraph 3.10 of the report sets out the key findings by each sport, and paragraph 3.11 of the covering report sets out the overall findings. So in terms of cricket, what the refresh is saying is that there's sufficient supply of pitches to meet the current and future demand. In terms of football, there's sufficient capacity of grass pitches, but a shortfall of 1 full-size 3G artificial grass pitch for football. And for rugby, the refresh concludes that there's insufficient supply of pitches across the district. So overall, what the PPS refresh is saying is that there's an overall emphasis on the need to improve the quality of existing pitches, which is the same as the conclusion in the 2016 original PPS. In terms of how the document will be used, that's before members tonight, paragraph 3.13 of the report sets out how it will be used, including, so first of all, it will be used as updated evidence to implement the adopted local plan policy INF3, sport, open space and recreation, and to be used in negotiating with developers to achieve planning gain to deliver the actions that are set out in the playing pitch strategy. So that's the evidence to show what's needed in the district. It will also be used as evidence to inform any Craven local plan review, but also the development of the new local plan for the new authority, for the new North Yorkshire Authority. So it's up-to-date evidence that will inform that. And also it will be used by the Council's Sports Development Officer and other officers in the Council to work with clubs, etc., to deliver actions which may include supporting bids for funding for specific projects as well. So turning to the recommendations of the report, then members are are recommended to accept this playing pitch strategy refresh as set out Appendix A as an update to the original playing pitch strategy that was prepared in 2016 and approved by this subcommittee. So if there's any questions.
Thank you. I have to say, the thing that stood out to me when I was reading this report, dog fouling on sports pitches. What the hell is wrong with people with dogs? Are these people right in their heads? What the hell are they thinking of, taking dogs to do their business on a sports pitch? I cannot get my head around that at all. It's just absolutely abhorrent. I mean, it's not really an issue for this piece of work, but it was mentioned a few times, and I know from my own experience, I'm sure other members will from their parishes. I mean, I don't know, what do you do? Do you put a bounty on these people? I mean, I don't know what. I was beyond words, I really was. Anyway, I've got my own comments I'd like to make, but I shall start with Councillor Rose, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think this is extraordinarily detailed. I mean, I have to confess, I have not read every single word of it, but made a good effort, I would like to say. And incredibly comprehensive and so well put together. What I liked about it was that I was able to look for the areas where I particularly have an interest, either as a councillor or as a member of a sporting club. So I do want to say thank you for such a stunning report. Obviously, it does give us a lot to consider. And whilst it's sort of saying gentle things like improve quality, we're not short of pitches, I don't want us to miss the areas that do need improving. And obviously one of them is provision for female changing facilities in several cases, and for those with disabilities. So there's obviously a need there. Whilst we don't need another pitch, we still do need to improve the facilities in certain cases. So I thought that was something I really wanted to just highlight. Again, coming back to this idea of quality, not quantity, I do hope that isn't missed. It might be easy to say, this is a pretty good report, we've got what we need, but to slide over the fact that there is still work to be done. So really linking in with the provision for women and those with disabilities. Thirdly, funding issues. Obviously, there are a lot of little projects on the go that are still awaiting funding or looking for funding, and I would like to think that somehow or other those particular projects get the support they need to access to get hold of that funding. Because there are lots of little projects that you think, oh, if only they just had that little bit more money, they'd get it done. So I thought that was important. And I really do think the role of volunteers cannot be overlooked. None of this, none of the 107 pages would happen if it wasn't for volunteers. And I think that's really very important to recognise. I mean, obviously officers oversee and help us get things sorted. I'm not disputing, I'm not getting rid of that at all. But without the volunteers, you don't have a sports facility. You don't have anything. You don't have a cricket club, you don't have rugby clubs, you don't have a running club. Not that we have a pitch, but I do want that really made clear, if there at some point that this is a fabulous report, but if you haven't got your volunteers, you don't have anything. So that was my penultimate point. And the other one is, what happens when Craven District Council goes? What happens to all this fabulous work? Where does it go? Who will make sure things happen? I'm scared. Well, I just think I'd really want to know that none of this has gone to waste, because it's such a useful document, invaluable, I'd have thought. And in May 2023, I hope that this is definitely part and parcel of whatever happens next.
Could I just ask, Ruth, when you answer this, there's possibly a broader point about
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the this document being, I suppose it's the first piece of the local plan evidence that we've updated since the adoption of the plan, and there's a need to do that, so that because there's a need to keep our evidence up to date, because there's a lot of uncertainties and questions that we haven't got the answers to at the moment about what a new local plan is going to look like. And there's a requirement to prepare, once the new authority is formed, then the regulations say that there should be a new local plan for the new North Yorkshire Authority prepared within 5 years from 2023. So obviously that's quite a big task, but also we don't know whether that will be a single plan or whether there would be it would go back maybe more to what we used to have in the past, where there was a structure plan that the county produced, which is sort of strategic policies, and then the sort of areas, obviously the district won't exist anymore, but the areas could produce like the sort of more detailed, like the site allocations and detailed design policies, for example, but that's all being discussed at the moment in terms of officers are meeting across North Yorkshire authorities at the moment to talk about that. But certainly I think the message is, with the local government reorganisation groups that I sit on, and in terms of spatial planning, is that we have to continue with keeping each of the district's plans as up to date as possible, and that will involve updating the evidence. So, whereas the playing pitch strategy, there's a need to keep it up to date, and Sport England, they have specific guidance that says that, as well as the NPPF saying that. So it's important to keep it up to date, but it's also important to keep it up to date for spatial planning and preparation of a new local plan or review of our local plan. We don't know what's going to happen with it entirely, but we do need to keep the evidence as up to date as possible, so that we can keep our plan as up to date as possible.
Is that right? That is reassuring, I must say, so thank you very much for that. Obviously, there are sort of mini black holes around the place about what is going to happen, but it is reassuring to know that it is going to be of use and obviously of great value, and to have so much evidence is essential. So that, as I say, is reassuring. I just have to say, I think it is an excellent piece of work. I'd give it 2 stars, if that's all right. Thank you.
Right, have we got any other questions from members? Councillor Myers, and then Councillor Shuttleworth, and then any other members? There's a shrug. Was that an indication to speak after Councillor Shuttleworth?
Yes, I think probably going to be.
Yeah. So Myers, Shuttleworth.
No, I'll go last.
Okay. Councillor Myers will keep his powder dry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my question is about Wharfdale rugby facilities. I agree with a lot of what's been said here. Quite frankly, I didn't know they had a need for ladies changing facilities. I didn't know ladies played up there, but anyway, you live and learn. My main concern about Wharfdale, and I don't know whether it falls within the scope of this this study and recommendation, it's the absolutely dreadful access. If you're a pedestrian, you can get out faster than you can in a car, and similarly going in at just before a match. And if there could be some way of achieving that as part of this overall plan, I think it really would be welcomed.
Carol will know about this because she'll have had her ear bent by interested parties connected with Wharfdale. They do have some very ambitious plans, Brian, to better the whole thing at Wharfdale, working with the school as well, which has inadequate playing fields. So they're looking at a rather more holistic approach, working with Grassington as well, but really upgrading the thing. It's really quite ambitious. This policy will help it, you know. They're going to have to get some massive funding from somewhere.
I appreciate it.
So,
am I on now? Yes, right. Yes, I appreciate what you say about an ambitious scheme, but the whole key to that is in improving the access.
oh, this is part.
Is it? Right, thank you.
I would suggest if you're unhappy with the access at Wharfdale, you support North Wibblesdale instead. I could. I do. Anyway. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to be fair, I haven't got a lot to say. I've read the report. It's very well written. Thank you. The one question I would ask is, and I don't know if it's the right forum to ask it, presumably this sets us up so what we've said is, well, we don't need too many pitches, but we need to keep improving things. So presumably that sets us up so that when a developer wants to build 100 houses, we can have a contribution, which is what it's there for. When a developer does give a contribution, imagine somebody builds 100 houses in Settle, or doesn't. When they give a contribution in Settle, does that contribution go in a general pot that could be spent anywhere, or is it spent in Settle?
Thank you. I think it would be ring fenced to the area because it's linked to the evidence, which is the action, includes the action plan, which says what is needed within that specific location, and it's about any sort of conditions or any contribution from a developer being linked to the proposal in the first place. I don't know whether Carol can come in and provide any more detail on how that actually works.
Yeah, basically, if a developer comes in and there's a planning application, the plain pitch strategy, along with your other two evidence-based documents, which is the open space, play and open space strategy and the built facilities strategy, the priorities and the actions which are in those strategies help to direct where the funding would go to from a Section 106 agreement linked to a plan and gain. So that's part of the purpose of those documents, is so that actually any potential funding comes in, gets used to the benefit to improve the quality and provision for the people who are within that area of the district.
Thank you. So if somebody builds 40 houses in Gargrave, the money will be spent in Gargrave. Am I right?
I think it would depend on what the evidence is saying. So if there's if the evidence is saying that something is needed in Gargrave, like an improvement to a pitch or an improvement to a play area or a new pitch or a new play area, whatever, then that evidence would inform the decision about where it's spent. If that's not identified in Gargrave, then it would we look at the actual action plan to see sort of where that should.
So Ruth, the answer to the question is Gargrave would get first call on it. If Gargrave don't want it, it doesn't mean it isn't paid. It will go into a general pot. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the spending of the developer contributions is informed by the evidence and what the evidence says. So this evidence is got these action plans for the different sports, telling you what's required within different areas, and that will be used by the sports development officer and the DM officer and the legal team to identify where that money should be spent to achieve those actions.
Can I just ask, so, I mean, would we be looking at the... Using the guardrail as an example, so if it's spent in guardrail, would you be looking towards the nearest buildings facility
I'm not an expert on this in terms of how it all works in process. All I know is that it will be informed by the evidence. So if there's not a need in Gargrave to improve, for example, a playing pitch that's identified in the evidence, then the evidence will then inform where that money will be spent. But I think we need someone from the council legal team.
And can I also assist members? So for example, say that the cricket pitch and the football pitch are fine in Gargrave, and the children's playground's fine. But we recognise that Upper Wolfdale School have inadequate facilities. Gargrave children, many of them go to Upper Wolfdale. The rugby, all those who play rugby from Gargrave play at Wolfdale. So I think that's then when you'd look at those requirements on the action plans.
Right, Rachel's just going to speak, then I'll come to Alan, and then I'll come to Chris.
I think
what you're getting at is that the money doesn't not get, we get the money and it gets spent. It's not that it goes back to the developer or anything like that. The money is kept within the council's coffers and it gets spent. Is that what you're meaning?
Thank you. Yes, that was the first question. But it would be nice to be able to assure that people... Yes, that sort of answers it, but it's nice to be able to assure the people of Gargrave, for example, that they will get first call on it if they have need of it. And I think we've established that. And we've also established that it won't disappear if they don't need it. It will still come in and somebody will get it, which is what I was asking. Thank you.
Alan, then Chris, then Brian, and we'll come back to you, Sam.
Just is it going to stay on, do you think? All right, just getting my thoughts together again. I'm interested in when this policy is going to trip in, because as we sit here tonight, last week, Gareth Wooler put in his application for 36 houses in Martin Road in Gargrave on a site that's in the local plan for 44 houses. So it would seem that there's a fairly good chance that they will get planning consent, and it will come to the committee. I'm sure it'll be called in, won't it? But as I'm speaking as a member of the planning committee, we are very soon going to be confronted with the decision on this particular aspect. So what I'm really saying is, when does this, like a parliamentary act, become law?
And obviously, using that as an anecdotal suggestion without any predetermination whatsoever, when would this policy come in, Ruth?
Well, if members approved or accepted the recommendation to accept this revised playing pitch strategy refresh into as updated evidence, then it will be used by the council straight away, and the sports development officer of the council will use it to then do a consultation response on any planning applications that come in. So it will be used, straight away, because it will update the original playing pitch strategy and the action plans that we've published.
Well, in the event that. But sorry, what? Yeah. Ruth, it has to go to policy, doesn't it? But it would still be. Doesn't this have to go to policy? No.
No, under the terms of reference for this subcommittee, then this subcommittee can approve updates to evidence. Yeah.
We have got Rose, Shuttleworth, Pringle. That's okay.
Somewhat anecdotal, I'm afraid, but perhaps help with Richard, your comment about, the money being used effectively. It would have been pre-COVID and when Bruce was still working with us. He, for example, spotted several pots of money in and around Skipton with all the various developments and looked at a whole as to what Skipton would benefit, how Skipton sporting facilities would benefit. And just because something was built in one place, it didn't mean that the money had to stay just there. He sort of pooled it all and made sure that overall the sporting facilities that were in need of additional funding got it for the benefit of as many people as possible. So, just because Housing Development A had one lot of money, the money didn't have to stay just for Housing Development A. B, C and D, they all got together. He got all the money together and sort of put it as a general pot. Am I making sense here? I just think I feel very confident that the money that we will get from 106 will be used effectively where it is of best use. I mean, it may feel like Skipton gets loads of the funding, but lots of people come into Skipton to use the facilities from all over. So I have to say, if it's any reassurance, I feel confident that the money we do get, and the more we get, the better, it's used effectively. Sorry.
Yeah, just come back. I completely agree. And the role of the sports development officer and Bruce in the past was to use that evidence to inform those decisions about where the developer contributions need to be spent to achieve the action.
Right, Councillor Shuttleworth, Councillor Pringle.
Yes, Chairman. It may be a hypothetical question, this, but in view of the imminence of reorganisation, some of these Section 106 agreements can take some considerable time to negotiate and be implemented by the developer writing a cheque. How is that going to be affected by reorganisation? Will it be ring-fenced, as it were, to be spent as relating to the development in what was Craven?
Sorry, yeah. Again, I think I'm not an expert on that at all, and that's something that is being discussed as part of the local government reorganisation, how these things are going to work. But I do know that obviously Section 106 agreement has to be related to the development, and so that's set out in national planning policy, the framework. So that will have to be that national policy planning policy will have to be met. But the detail of how that will work and the timings, I'm not 100% sure of, and that's something I think that will be sorted out as we go through local government reorganisation. But also, we'd need our legal colleagues to provide us a bit more certainty on that detail.
Thank you. Well, the moral of the story with Brian's comment, which is a very valid one, is that the development officer needs to get on and spend some of the money because it was given for the benefit of the residents around here. And if there's a chance of losing it, surely legitimate schemes should be done. My reason for putting my hand up was because I think Councillor Sutcliffe was actually worried about something that doesn't exist. He seemed to worry about when this got adopted. We already have things saying developers will give money for this cause. They exist. This is just an update of it. So if you look at the application that's currently in, there are already figures being talked about. So it's not rubber stamp this, get it past policy, and then we can do it. We can do it, and we are already doing it. So I think there's an unnecessary worry there.
Yeah, I can just reiterate that obviously this is not, we have our adopted local plan policy which is INF3 on sport, open space and recreation, which requires a developer contribution if for certain types of proposals, and that's not changing, that we can't change that unless we review the plan. But what this is just an update to the evidence to support that policy, and then, like we're saying, the council officers will work with this to try and achieve those actions. And perhaps just going back to a point that Councillor Rose made about being able to update the policy, update the evidence, and to achieve those actions. As I said, when we had the 2016 playing pitch strategy, then in 2017 and 19, the council prepared, it was the sports development officer that prepared progress reports on each action within the action plans to show what's been achieved, what's changed on site, and that will be done then from this being, if this is accepted as by members, then progress reports will be done within that next 3-year time frame. Before then, we need to update it again.
With respect, everything you've told us and everything that Councillor Pringle's told us is in operation now, yes, but it's based on historical evidence. This report of yours is going to provide more up-to-date evidence and perhaps a better deal for the authority than the existing legislation would provide for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, the whole point is to keep the evidence as up to date as possible, so that then, yeah, the council can achieve the best outcome for the community in terms of developer contributions and achieving what's actually needed on the ground.
Well, I'm glad we all understand why we're here tonight. That's good. Right. Would it be fair to say, statement, that possibly the biggest danger is that our sports clubs haven't got worked up plans of what their needs are, so that when an opportunity raises its head in whatever village it may be, Gargrave, other villages are available, they may miss the boat? Would you say that's a fair statement? So that, I mean, all I'm thinking is, should ward members be making sure that their local sports clubs live to the fact that there may be funding opportunities, but they need to have a worked up plan in place to be able to access them? Would that be a fair statement?
I think consultation is a big part of this work, that of preparing this playing pitch strategy, and Carol might be able to come in here just in terms of, you know, Carol with her work, she consulted with all the different sports clubs and town and parish councils to try and get a picture of what the situation was with each club, and you know, I don't know whether Carol can provide a bit more detail as to what the input of clubs has been on that, in terms of that.
Yeah, I think across the district you've got a mixture of clubs. Some are very well prepared and know what their ambitions are and their aspirations. Some have got plans in place which are fairly drawn up in detail and ready to go. And then obviously there are some that know that they need to do pitch improvements, and that's just on the to-do list for them. So I think it's worthwhile clubs knowing what it is that they want to do, and particularly around where it's about pitch improvements. In the report, certainly under football, there's a reference to something called pitch power, and that is something that I would encourage all football clubs to register with and use to assess their playing pitches, because that helps them with a gateway to external funding from the Football Foundation. So I think clubs knowing what they need to do and having some ballpark figures around what things might cost is really useful. The one thing I will say though is, and I think this is where people just need to be a bit mindful about the plan and gain funds. When a developer comes in and plan and gain is identified, there is the process to go through till it gets to the point where a legal agreement is signed. Now, the money, the actual cash in the bank money to the council, doesn't come in until that developer reaches certain trigger points on a site, as in they've built the 50th house or whatever it might be in the legal agreement, and until the money's actually in the council's bank, so to speak, then it can't physically be spent. So my only sort of word of caution is that sometimes there are developments happen, planning applications approved and developments are expected to happen, but it could be 3 years, 4 years down the line before any money comes in. So what I would be urging sports club to do is to be looking at other sources of funding and fundraising, and not be totally reliant on the plan and gain, and see the plan and gain as the added bonus to their projects. I don't know whether does that sort of helpful, because we can sit there for a number of years waiting for money which can be passed to sports clubs, and in the meantime they might have been able to access external funding to improve their pitches by the Football Foundation, and then some planning gain comes in, and then that means they can do those added extras or add value to their projects.
Can I say, it's fair to say that we do give some help, don't we, through our sports development officer to clubs to access funding and things like that, or point them in the right direction. Is that correct? I'm looking at our captive sports development officer sat at the back very quietly. Right, so, right, Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to say, sort of to echo what other members have said, it's a fantastic detailed report, and its benefit is beyond the realms of planning policy and potential planning gain, because it informs all of us about where the strengths and weaknesses are in sports facilities, accessibility, and so on across Craven. And I think it's very helpful to ward members who can enable some of the less switched on clubs to funding as small as our own ward member grants and as large as the big sources that can be tapped into in Sports England with the assistance of the Sports Development Officer. So, we do have those facilities to help them also. I really welcome this document and all the work that's gone into it, and including our substantial part of the national park is really helpful too, because we must look at the district in a sort of holistic way. There's no point in being smug down in Skipton if they can only play skittles in Upper Wharfdale. So yeah, really, really valuable document. I think it's very unfair with respect to members to keep asking officers questions about what will happen with the new unitary authority, because they are political decisions. Councillor Shuttleworth will be calling the shots on this as a member of the shadow authority, I have no doubt, in due course. But really, it's for members. It's for members elected to the new authority in May to make sure that, I hope, that all this is kept as local as possible, that the area committees, whatever they are responsible for the implementation of our local plan, that the officers are kept as local as possible with local knowledge, and that these documents don't get lost, and that they continue to be a roadmap for sports development in Craven. And if that doesn't happen, we, the politicians who pushed for a unitary, with all the safeguards and the protecting of democracy and the devolving down of power, have misled the public, and they've failed them. If the consequence of a unitary authority is this stuff just goes, then we've failed them. So it's very important for those who are elected, some of whom may be round this table come May, to make sure that happens. It really is crucial. The authority will not be formed by meetings of officers. It will be formed by new members. That's the thing to remember. But it is really important that the take from Craven is that these things really matter. So there.
Thank you.
Could I just express admiration for Councillor Myers' confidence?
And a degree of optimism. Right, I can just get some slightly technical questions here. We've mentioned, I noticed that mini rugby's mentioned. Is there some reason that the 4 to 7 year olds aren't included in those numbers? Because I can guarantee that they have under 5s teams. My boys have gone right through them, so they didn't seem to be mentioned in the report. That's one thing. Page 52, the Giggleswick School development 3G pitch, which was an exception site as part of the local plan based on the provision of a 3G pitch, which it now isn't going to happen, it's something else. That sits okay, bearing in mind there's slightly controversial nature to that development because it was outside the local plan originally, but as I say, brought in as an exception site with that make weight of the 3G pitch. And then on page 53, mentioned the Helifield Football Club, which would seem to be who have tenants on somebody else's site, which has previously had a planning application put in on it. If that were the case that that site was developed, are there any safeguards that would require an alternative provision for a football pitch in Helifield, either by the current landlord or somebody else? I mean, you know, the local authority, I don't know. So those are my questions, please.
Thank you. Well, perhaps if Carol could come in and in terms of the specifics of the sites.
Well, just going through the list, the mini rugby, the age ranges which we use in the playing pitch strategy correlate with what the national governing bodies use for their sports, and those are sort of the official national governing body age ranges, and therefore the numbers and have to reflect those. So that's, from a technical point of view, that's almost prescriptive through Sport England and the national governing bodies. In terms of the Giggleswick, got to be a little bit careful because I believe the planning application is actually in for that. So, but in terms of from a PPS point of view, the creation of 2 new grass pitches more than covers helps to cover the deficit for rugby, and sort of covers the fact that there is now no ambition to have a rugby compliant 3G pitch over at Giggleswick. So the actual sort of calculations work out that actually that area is gaining rugby pitches, which from a rugby football union point of view, there is still a deficit for rugby pitches in the area, and that helps to alleviate that deficit for the supply of rugby pitches. And the Helifield one, just in general terms, part of the reason Sport England have a guidance and methodology on playing pitches is to protect playing pitches. So, and for anybody to build or propose a development on an existing playing pitch, that can only be granted if they meet one of Sport England's 5 exceptions. And one of those would be, and particularly because in Craven, you have not got an oversupply of pitches, so you can't afford to lose any sports pitches. If there was to be a proposal to develop on a sports pitch in the Craven district, it would have to be replaced elsewhere. So I think that sort of broadly covers what you were asking.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. And just to add that the adopted local plan policy INF3 has a specific criteria in it that it talks about if there's any, it's criterion 3, that if there's any, well, it safeguards existing pitches and open spaces from any loss, any unavoidable loss. And if that there was a proposal that involved a loss of a pitch or an open space, it would have to meet. It would only be acceptable in limited circumstances. So either there be a surplus, which, as Carol said, the evidence is telling us there isn't a surplus of pitches, an equivalent open space or pitch or built sports facility, the benefit of which will be at least the equal to that being lost, will be provided elsewhere in an accessible location nearby, or if specific sites are identified in the playing pitch strategy as being partially surplus, then there's a criteria, a sub-criteria that deals with that as well. So, obviously the adopted local plan policy is conforms and is in line with the national policy that protects existing open spaces and pitches.
Sorry, Chair, to say that it already has done in the case of Helifield. There was an application to build on the football pitch. They did provide an alternative site that wasn't quite the same size as a football pitch, and it floods for about 5 months of the year. So it was turned down by the officers in line with our policy.
Thank you. Good to hear. The people of Helifield, who football fans, will be got a hoop, I'm sure. Right, have we got any more questions, members? Are we, Councillor Shuttleworth?
Yes, it's just, I appreciate that this study is it solely related to football, cricket, rugby, and what was the other one? Hockey. Is it solely related to those sports? Right. What about the position regarding other sports in a broader term, such as bowling greens, or, don't smile, older people play bowls?
Yeah, the playing pitch strategy refresh is refreshing the original playing pitch strategy, obviously, that was done in 2016. So it covers the same sports, in terms of bowling greens, they are protected in the local plan under their in terms of the open space. So when the original evidence was done for the local plan, in terms of open space and sport and recreation, there was 3 strands of it. The first one was the playing pitch strategy, which looked at pitches and formal sports like football, cricket, hockey and rugby. Then we had an open space assessment, and then we had a built sports facilities assessment that looked at like swimming pools and indoor gyms and gymnasiums and things. So this is just an update to the playing pitch strategy.
So we can look forward to consideration of these other activities in due course.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, it's evidence that we'll have to update.
Brian, just to remind you, this is about sports, not games. Bowling is a game.
It can be a very serious game in that case.
I'm sorry, but anything that you can wear slacks and a jumper to isn't a sport, it's a game. Right. Point proven.
And we've got a classic example staring us in the face. It's been mentioned several times in our discussion that Craven hasn't got a hockey pitch. And yet it's got literally dozens of tennis clubs. Practically every village has got a tennis club when you start counting them up. And I would say in the future a lot more people are going to continue playing tennis than are likely to even think about playing hockey.
I think there's more chance of rugby league taking off than hockey, but anyway, a very fair point. Have you got anything to come back with on that, or is it just a general statement?
No, I think the playing pitch strategy refresh. Carol will correct me if I'm wrong here, but it identifies that there are 2 pitches that is available for hockey. One at South Craven and the other one at Giggleswick. But there's no clubs. There's no actual hockey clubs that are based in Craven. And so clubs will come from elsewhere to play on those pitches.
So, if we haven't got anything more to add, I think we should move to the recommendation 2.1 to accept the PPS refresh as set out in Appendix A as an update to the original. I've got a proposal, I've got a seconder, Councillor Bowles. And do we need a show of hands, members, or are we all happy to say that that's passed? Thank you, that's all gone through unanimously. I think tonight's takeaways are that bowling's a game. You shouldn't let your dogs on a sports pitch for walkies. And that we still have work to do as a district in terms of our sports provision. So, as ward members, I think we all need to bang the drum with our local clubs and wherever possible, help them and point them in the direction of that young lady at the back there. Get you busy. Right.
And thanks to Carol for a really good report. Bless you.
Ruth,
The next meeting, well, I think will yet to be confirmed. I mean, we've got the draft supplementary planning documents that have the consultation finishes tomorrow. So the two that we brought to this subcommittee in December that were the first drafts, then we'll be bringing the second drafts back for approval for a second round of consultation. That was the flood risk and the good design, no, the green infrastructure and biodiversity SPDs. The other two, the good design and the rural workers dwellings that this subcommittee approved for the second round of consultation, then the next stage for those is approval, which will be a policy decision. So that there will be some SPDs to be brought back.
right, so date of the next meeting to be confirmed. Keep your diaries clear for the next exciting instalment of Craven Spatial Planning Committee. Right, with that we'll close the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance and thank you, officers, for your report.